We are talking about Rings of Power. The
Everybody's going,
showrunners.
this is a groan. Oh.
The showrunners break silence on the backlash. The Rings of Power backlash. Now, I'm going to let Shane go off on a tangent here, but before I do, just to be clear, I don't like Rings of Power because it's boring. It's boring. I don't care about.
For me.
I don't care about. Well, for me, I don't care about what race someone is, especially for characters that didn't have races before. I don't really care about any of that stuff. What I care about is that the show is boring and slow, and they waste so much time on so many things that have no bearing in the story. It's like either it's writing 101 or directing 101, but someone in that chain of command, that structure, is making a mistake with the show. And I believe that because we're in this industry, this time in this industry where no one wants to get in trouble, no one wants to get canceled, whoever's making the mistake, either the director or the writer or whatever, no one is standing up to that person and saying, hey, you can't spend 8 minutes looking at an axe. You just can't do it. You're doing it wrong. Like, you're doing this incorrectly. So no one is speaking up on how slow. I don't care how nice. Everyone's like so focused on how beautiful the show is. It's fine. It's pretty. Yes, graphics are great. The graphics department is doing their job. But bro, the pacing is so bad. It's so slow. It just is just patently boring. And it is. So that said, what we're talking about though is the showrunners speaking about some of their biggest critics and how patently evil the online trolling has gotten. And there's a lot more to this than just that headline. So pay attention. Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, my big problem with the show is there are a lot of problems, like in general, like we don't need to hear about like people and horses like being one in thoughts, one in feelings. Like we don't need to hear about people's mothers that don't really have anything to do with the show. There's a lot of unnecessary things in the show. My number one problem with the show is that they've messed up Galadriel. She's the main character of the show, and they did her so wrong, in my opinion, based on everything I know of Tolkien and how I feel, that it makes it hard for me to watch her and enjoy the show. The stuff with the dwarves, the stuff with the hobbits, fine. The stuff with the Numenorians, whatever. Not that big of a deal. I could watch the show and probably be like, okay. At least it's not as slow as Andor, which, okay. But here's the big problem. J.D. Payne and McKay, the guys who got this job, okay, we learn in this article about really what went behind Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power. These guys had really no experience. They had written 10 movie scripts over the years that went nowhere, never got picked up. They talk about it in here. Like, these movies were good, but the timing was bad and it just never happened. So they wrote all this stuff. Nothing ever happened. They had a little bit of writing in Star Trek Beyond. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
They were Bad Robot guys. They were inside Bad Robot. They were working. They were supporting. But here's what they really were. They were huge fans of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Mm-hmm.
Huge fans.
Yep.
Amazon wasn't the only one to want to do Tolkien. There was other streaming services, to include Netflix, that went to the Tolkien family and like pitched things. They pitched things like an Aragorn show or a Third Age show. And let me be frank with you guys. The Tolkien family turned their noses up at all this. Let me tell you who's at fault. There's a lot of people at fault. But you want to know who the number one person is at fault of this whole thing? J.R.R. Tolkien's ancestors.
Yeah.
They are a problem because they didn't like Peter Jackson's movies. They went off of the books. I'm like, people, I read the books and those were pretty close. There were some things that they added or removed, but it was they were good movies.
Right.
But they were upset about them. And you know what? They balked at everything, every idea. No, you can't do that. They are gatekeeping their grandfather's
Yep.
work because they feel like they have this noble clout.
Yeah.
They feel like they're kings and queens.
And they're
not.
and they're politically biased at the same time.
Right, but
Which makes it worse because they're like, oh, well, I'm not, the story's got to have this and that and this and that,
Right, but they are ultimately the descendants of Tolkien, not Tolkien himself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's really important here because they turned their noses up at everything. The shows that we would have really enjoyed seeing done and that could have been done properly by people who've made stuff before. I'm not blaming these showrunner guys. They really love Tolkien. When they greeted Tolkien's grandson, they talked to him in Elvish, bro.
Oh my
God. Like they greeted him in Elvish.
Is this the same grandson that couldn't get a book deal even though he's the ancestor of Tolkien?
Same one.
By the way, you're a bad writer if you share Tolkien's name and can't get a book deal.
Yeah, or for whatever reason. But I mean, the point is like, we ended up with these guys because they were passionate. They understand Tolkien. They love the stories, right? But they never made anything.
Right.
So they went through, I think they said something like maybe 14 pitches. They had to pitch this. This was such a big deal. Like Amazon made them go over and over and over it. They had to do this over and over again with multiple people, multiple times, to shareholders, to all kinds of people before they bought off on these guys because they were passionate.
Right.
And I got to tell you, if you told me like all the great things about Tolkien and how you were going to do it and blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing, cool. And I mean, I might believe you because like you're so passionate and you're speaking to me in Elvish. Like, oh my gosh, if you're speaking in Elvish,
right?
These guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, you know what you're doing.
But the reality is no matter what their intentions are, good or bad, they really don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And J.J. Abrams had to pull a couple strings from. They mentioned in this article how he really pushed the needle to get them to be able to do the show.
Right.
So let's just right there. And so when it comes to the lore, so the Tolkien family put him in a box. They forced him to do this second age thing.
Ugh.
Where there's the least amount of information.
Right. So unfortunate.
Interesting to do the whole Rings of Power and how they came about. It's a very interesting part of Tolkien lore, but not what people are familiar with. We could have been doing third age stories that would have been a whole lot more interesting with people who know how to make shows and movies. The Tolkien family said, no, we don't want that.
Ugh.
Because it's already been messed up enough or whatever. So they embrace this. So they take responsibility. The showrunners take responsibility. Amazon has to take responsibility. They needed to put somebody in there with these guys that could help them and say, look, we don't want to talk about horses and moms that make no point, or dad. Elrond's dad makes no point.
Or any character that has nothing to do with the story. Right.
Right. All of these things that are like, okay, it's cool. It's like some of the lore. Remember, we talked about this in another thing with like Quantum Leap. Like you can give us member berries and you can give us Easter eggs, but it better be part of the story.
It better be part of the story.
Right. And most people don't understand the Easter eggs here anyways. So I digress. The big thing that came out here is now we have a lot of fans because the show is not made well and there's a huge expectation. There's a lot of people who just don't like it and they have a really good reason not to like it. And then part of that sub base is there are a group of people who are frustrated about using people of color in the show. Okay, which right, wrong, or the otherwise is really one of the least problems of the show, frankly speaking.
Right.
And but there's people that are out there who are racists, and listen, hey, the world is full of all kinds of people, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they don't exist because they do. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they're not on Twitter because they are.
Yeah, they are.
Or whatever social media platform they are. And apparently they were attacking people from the show. And I don't know directly. I don't know why you would allow anybody to directly tweet you anyways, if you don't know people. But things were happening. And so the showrunners, inexperienced as they are, were asked about these attacks, and they called them patently evil.
Ugh.
And here's the thing. Well, they were talking about the racist attacks being patently evil. They weren't talking about people who just don't like the show in general, but
Right.
people who are talking about this show in a negative light kind of grabbed onto that and said, hey, they think everybody who hates the show is patently evil.
Right.
Listen,
I saw all those tweets.
This is no good for our world, guys, when we do this stuff, when we take people's words and twist them so that we can make everything make the temperature a lot hotter. It's just not healthy. It's not good.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do it.
It's good for clicks. It's good for clicks. That's why it's done.
Right. So they're overreacting on their side against the fan reaction. On the other side, they're overreacting as well. And you end up with this powder keg of things happening where now people are just that much more angry.
Right.
The problem with the show is everything that we just said. That's where it needs to come back to. It could probably be turned around. Somehow make Galadriel mature a whole bunch in the next season. Get rid of some of the frivolous stuff. Bring in somebody to help the showrunners make this a better show.
Yeah, like a seasoned person who knows how to make TV. Because like it's obvious that there's parts of this where they really know what they're doing, and there's parts where they don't. And I believe that the showrunners at fault there, because no matter how much they like Tolkien, like there is like some fundamental mistakes being made this show that makes it unbearably slow, unbearably poorly paced, and it makes the story hard to follow.
Right. And, they're making mistakes. And listen, there were mistakes made by Peter Jackson too. I'm not going to lionize him. I was watching The Hobbit again, and I was really paying closer attention to Galadriel because of the Rings of Power. And I realized like she essentially by herself banishes Sauron to the south. And like that character probably shouldn't have been able to do that in that show.
Right.
So there's mistakes, there's things that happen, but the thing of it is like you can't double down on it and keep going. You need to fix it. If this is a 5-season show, we got like 4 more seasons.
Right.
And that character is extraordinarily unlikable. That needs to change. And you need to get rid of all of the uselessness, all of the useless dialogue, everything else. And you need to tighten the show up. And maybe people will like it. Stop complaining that fans don't like it. You're not going to win that. If people are being racist and they're being evil, you need to just don't turn it into a headline. Ignore it. Push it, be specific, because people who are looking for some bad things to talk about your show are going to latch on to every negative thing that comes out of your mouth, and they're going to twist it to form their narrative.
Right.
And that's just the truth of how things are today. So this article is actually really interesting. If you get a chance to look at it, the Hollywood Reporter, they go deep into everything in here. They go through everything that happened. It's eye-opening in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
These guys should have never got this show, bottom line.
Yeah, and that's I'm sorry to hear that, man. They just need more time in the industry. These are the same people that were passed over for the Star Trek script, right?
They were writing the Star Trek 4 script, and it got moved on, right?
Right.
And there were other people. There were, one of the rivals was the person who wrote The Theory of Everything, Anthony McCartan. There was there were quite a few other people. They wanted to make this show Braveheart instead of Narnia, which arguably Tolkien is kind of more Narnia than Braveheart.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that they did the gore and the blood and things like that. That's actually a good part of it. But yeah, they just weren't really ready for this, I don't think. And they're going to need help. So bring somebody else in here to tell them, you need to fix this, you need to change this. In season 2, which they've been filming, hopefully they can fix a lot of what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. Well, either way, we're still covering it. So, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I want to know more about, I want to hear about those guys talk about Rings of Power even more. It's really easy, because on Fridays, we talk about it every Friday. So come on down, the water's warm, and enjoy some, or not, enjoy us discussing Rings of Power on Fridays.
Right.
Also, hit that subscribe button and on the way to the comment section, let us know what you guys think about Rings of Power. Are you guys watching it? What problems do you have? Etc. 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 Let us know in the comment section below.